Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Snyder with Ignite360, and I'm here with Rob Volpe, Ignite360 CEO, and we are glad to have you here with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning and afternoon for those of you on the East Coast.
Absolutely, whichever time zone you're in. If you're here to find out more as to why empathy is critical within the workplace, and then possibly how to apply the aspects of empathy in your workplace with, let's say, better customer care, improved internal work relationships, or perhaps increasing your company sales, you've come to the right place. So you can chat with us by asking questions. We welcome questions. To do that, simply click on chat in the upper right corner and select all panelists. Your questions will only be seen by us. Here's something we'd like to learn right off the bat. If you're in a room right now with multiple folks viewing perhaps just one screen on a projection, would you let us know how many are in your room? Again, just click chat and then all panelists. With that, Rob and I will go behind the curtain to get us started. Here are the surprising truth headlines for today. Would you sign up to learn how to grow your business by 60%? We will show you how one company did just that by increasing their sales by 60% with a focus on empathy. It's what we call ROE, or return on empathy. And with empathy skills down 40% among folks under 37, are you here to find ways to develop empathy skills and apply them to growing your business? By the end of our time together, you will learn why empathy is critical, have a clear understanding of the 5 steps to build empathy, and apply them in your workspace. Let's find out more. As I mentioned, Rob Volpe is here with me today, and Rob is joining us from San Francisco, and I'm here in actually a cooler Phoenix today, surprisingly. Starting earlier this year, we were here at Ignite360 unveiling a new direction for the company. We've been cited over and over again. I gotta say, it's really quite nice to have your clients recognize you time and time again for the empathy that we bring into the work that we do. And in many cases, clients rely upon us for our empathy work in what we seemingly do every day. So we thought, why not share our expertise and add or pass along that empathy dimension for you to use in your roles? We call it Empathy Camp. Our Empathy Camp is about uncovering that surprising truth about empathy and how empathy has a key role in the decisions you make and the critical thinking you apply to your job. To get us going, we have a plan for our time together. We will spend 45 minutes or so on our orientation and leave 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. We're introducing empathy now, obviously, and we'll get into the practical knowledge and skills, followed by taking it further, and then time for Q&A. We think it's vital first, if we're going to talk about empathy, to make sure we all are on the same page and have the same definition of empathy. It's about sharing someone else's experience. Oftentimes, empathy is either confused with sympathy or thought to be the same. They are different, and one way to think about them is it's the difference between 3 and 4 letters. Sympathy is the ability to feel for a person, while empathy is the ability to feel with a person. As you can see here, it's about almost having a protective shell around that person. And sympathy, with empathy, it's almost being side by side, the ability to feel with that person. For companies, being able to empathize can mean the difference of not understanding or not knowing their customer. Once an empathy shift takes place, it can mean growing a business. For those of you, and I suspect there are many of you online with us today, who have delved more into empathy, It's a hot topic right now. It's gotten a lot of attention, and some of us have spent time in it, like we have, as part of our business. We are focusing on cognitive empathy today. There is affective empathy, or where we respond to another person's emotions. Cognitive empathy, on the other hand, is a much more conscious endeavor to recognize accurately and understand another's emotional state or point of view. Again, for today, we are talking about cognitive empathy. So Rob, why don't you come back in and join us now?
All right. So as Eric mentioned in the beginning of the session, there's a 40% decline in empathy skills measured amongst people under 37 years old. And I'll get into some of that detail in a minute. But regardless of your age, the empathy deficit is affecting many of us. The photo here, I've got a series of different photos I'm going to show, and I think some of them might look familiar to you. Here's one at breakfast, might have happened this morning for some of you. It might even be your dinner table tonight. I'd invite you to bring some awareness to what you notice coming out of today's session in your interactions, not only with your colleagues, but also in your personal life. So here we've got two people sitting together alone. They're looking into their devices instead of being together and interacting. So there's no conversation. One's on his tablet, she's on her phone. And without that interaction, how can they possibly be able to see each other's point of view? They're not even having a conversation, let alone a sharing of ideas or perspective. And if you're not engaging with somebody, you're not going to be able to build empathy with them. I've seen versions of this particular scene play out everywhere. I've seen this at sporting events, I've seen it at art exhibits, as well as music concerts. People are looking at the world today through a secondary lens rather than taking everything in with their own eyes. That's creating distance. It diminishes your perspective. There's something in between you and what's actually happening. So that means you're once removed from the activity. It makes it a bit of an echo, if you would. And all except for the one woman you'll notice in the front left, and she's hearing, seeing, smelling, and feeling. She is right there in the moment. She's not distracted by anything else. So she's able to actually engage fully, participate, and see what's going on and take it in and then ultimately process it. So what's behind some of this? You've probably heard about the bubble that we're all living in, and bubbles extend. Typically, you hear about the bubble as it relates to things that are happening in Washington, D.C., but we're each living in our own bubbles, and we actually live in multiple bubbles. A bubble is really a collective or a group of people that have a shared perspective or set of beliefs. So if you think about all the different bubbles that you might exist in, one can just be your community at large, the town that you live in. You also have your friendship circles, who's in your network on LinkedIn, who are your friends on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or Twitter followers. Those are part of your bubble. Similarly, your places of work, and even within work, you can have a bubble that is your company, but you can also have a bubble based on your function and your role within the company. Each one of those bubbles has a particular point of view, and when you isolate yourself into that bubble, we're not ultimately then seeing or listening to people outside of it. As a result, then you're only reinforcing your own beliefs. You're getting things curated for you that fit within your worldview. It's confirmation bias writ large. And that diminishes our empathy for understanding for other people. There was a study out of University of Michigan from 2010, found they did a meta-analysis of college student surveys from 1979 to 2009. And in that analysis, they found that post-2001, there was a 40% decline in empathy than in the previous decades. So that means from 2001 onward to 2009, there was a 40% decline in empathy. And they were looking at just the question of, from some student surveys of, are you able to see the point of view of your classmates? There's a 40% decline on that. So if you think about it, those seniors from 2001, if you roll back 15, 16 years ago, they're in their mid-30s. And there's no indication that those empathy skills have rebounded since they entered the workforce. The people that did the initial study in University of Michigan are actually going back and looking at the latest set of data to bring it up to the middle of this decade. The results haven't been published yet, but there isn't any indication from them that there's anything that's changed, unfortunately. So what's causing the decline itself? The authors of the Michigan study pointed at and hypothesized that there's a self-directed media. So if you think about media broadly, it's not just about your smartphone or your tablet or your laptop, but also think about video games. Think about the way that we are communicating and interacting. It's all very solitary rather than back in the good old days where you used to be interacting with people more broadly. And even a video game, you might be playing multiplayer, you might be doing something with a friend over, but it's still directional towards the game itself rather than interacting with each other. You know, it's the difference between playing a game, sitting side by side with somebody, rather than playing with them and role-playing something, playing, you know, cops and robbers or something like that, that you might have played with when you were a child. Additionally, I would ask you to think about the last time that you were bored, truly bored. And when you felt that boredom come up, what did you do? A lot of times people start to feel bored when they're in the checkout line at the supermarket. There's a few minutes to kill. And so instead of using their imagination, thinking through something, you grab your device and you check in, rather than striking up a conversation with the person next to you or letting your imagination go with, you know, taking in whatever else is new and around you. And the limitation of doing that, that inability to be bored today also then limits our interaction with one another. So again, those secondary conversations that happen in our life aren't happening nearly as much. Additionally, kids, I will admit I'm a child of the 70s and the 80s, and you started hearing in the 90s kids complaining or parents talking about kids being overscheduled. So again, when you're overscheduled, you don't have time to be bored. You don't have time to imagine what you might do, take on a role or a persona, go out and play superheroes in the backyard. So instead, we're satisfying that through other means, and it's minimizing our ability to actually build empathy. A third photo also might look familiar, and you know, it's not uncommon to see this anymore in corporate America. We see it at some of our clients when we walk into meetings. And as you go into that meeting, before it starts, used to be people would sit around and talk about, hey, how was your weekend? Have you seen the latest episode of whatever the hot TV show is? Now you've got people out on their devices, they're checking their email, they might be doing work, they might be on Facebook, they might be texting, they might be doing something else, rather than actually interacting. And that small talk, how was your weekend? What are your plans? All of those smaller interactions help us connect with one another. And it's those small, tiny connections are so fragile, but those are the things that take root and actually build empathy. Empathy is like one of your senses. It's not something that you can just leave at home or leave at the office. It is with you all the time. It's a skill that we as humans are born to be able to do. How much you practice it and put it into effect can inform how good you are at it, but it's not something that you just turn off and live with you. So as a result, you bring your empathy skills or lack of them to work. And if you aren't able to empathize, it does hinder our ability to collaborate and to problem solve and to make decisions and to understand others. It inhibits our ability to see another person's point of view. That ends up affecting the bottom line. Beyond those immediate colleagues, empathy is also allowing us to connect with our customers. So empathy works in multiple ways. And it depends on kind of the perspective that you have or the role that you take within your company. You may be more customer facing, you may be more internally oriented. Empathy plays a part for everybody. And if you're able to connect with your customers, if you're in that type of a setting, that becomes a foundation for insights as well as fuel for innovation. And it enables collaboration. And all of that leads us to ask the question, how can a business thrive if empathy is limited between colleagues as well as with customers? How can your business possibly thrive? How can it grow if you actually don't have empathy? Got two case studies I want to share about empathy in the workplace. One is an internal example, and then the other one is an external marketing example, and both of them yielded some significant results.
This
I've
looks
already
like a
dated
blast from the past, Rob.
well, yes, Eric, and I was just going to say, since I've already dated myself, I do remember, and some of you might remember, when cell phones had external antennas, those little wires basically that you pulled up and you hoped didn't break off, because if it broke, you weren't going to get really good reception. That was the way cell phones used to be way back before smartphones. And even before flip phones, which had internal antennas, they had these cell phones had wires and knobs protruding. One cell phone manufacturer, however, there was a product marketer, had an idea to create an internal antenna. What if we created a phone that had an internalized antenna? Recognized that achieving that was going to enable a sleeker design, and that they could do more with the appearance of the phone. They could make it more stylish and more attractive to people. That sounds great, and if you're a marketer, you know, yes, that's what consumers want, and we're going to make that happen. However, if you're an engineer, and for those of you that have worked in any sort of cross-functional team, you know that collaboration requires, good collaboration requires seeing each other's point of view and being able to understand where somebody's coming from. And the product marketer in this case knew, okay, I want to make an antenna with a cell phone with an internal antenna instead of an external antenna. But in order to do that, I really need the engineers on board, and I've got to get them enrolled in this. So this particular product manager knew that the engineers at this company weren't going to be motivated by that external beauty and all of the marketing things that were going to be so great about this new design. And if they weren't properly enrolled, they'd push back and just say it couldn't be done. And we probably all, whether we're building cell phones or something else, we've probably experienced this in any sort of cross-functional collaborative environment. People come at things from their different points of view. So the product manager understood what the engineers were motivated by, and he focused on what could be done internally to incorporate what was once external. He focused on the things that got the engineers excited. What were the things that they were interested in figuring out? And it is that space issue. How do we internalize this? What do we do? Where's the space come from? How do I make more room? So as the product manager approached the engineers, he took their perspective and he made it a challenge to create this internal antenna from an engineering perspective rather than a marketing perspective. So doing all of that, he understood what motivated his colleagues. That fueled the collaboration. They were able to work through any issues. And the result of that was this phone from Samsung. And using empathy, Samsung was able to internally develop this phone based around an empathy experience, collaborating properly with engineers. And they sold 10 million cell phones with the internal antenna. And it took the entire cell phone industry in a new direction as all of the other manufacturers then started to build their cell phones with internal antennas. And that's just one example of how empathy in the workplace can have a big impact on the bottom line. Another example, ask yourself the question, how do you think about beauty? Before back in the 1900s, if you would have asked this question, you'd probably get a very stereotypical answer about models on catwalks and cover girls. But one company in their advertising communication team set out to really understand how women considered beauty. They took the time to listen without judgment to women's stories. And that inspired a campaign, and you may recognize these women from that campaign. But the understanding and building empathy with the consumer and how women actually see and consider beauty enabled the company to challenge the stereotypes instead of the presented ideals of real beauty. So they understood their consumers. That gave them a very sharp, clear differentiation, and created a marketing campaign that created that point of difference, communicated it, and enabled a huge sales growth. Dove and the Real Beauty campaign, they grew their sales from $2.5 billion to $4 billion in 10 years after the Real Beauty campaign launched. And that campaign is still running to this day. It's been so successful in key markets for them. And that's the 60% growth that a company can see when they take the time to apply empathy.
Taking a step further, we think of empathy as a muscle. Just as we have biceps that we train to build, so is empathy a muscle that we want to build. It takes practice and time to train. Some of you may have even hired coaches to help you with that, to refine that muscle just as you might do with your biceps. Just as we might go to the gym to train that muscle, so too is training a part of building your empathy muscle. So let's start to take a look at that. Drum roll, please. We want to introduce you to 5 steps to take in building your empathy muscle. First is dismantle judgment. Put aside your personal bias or thinking. Second is ask good questions to begin to understand. This is about not asking leading questions. It's about asking questions from a place of curiosity and inquisitiveness, keeping a blank slate in mind and staying open to what you hear. Third is to actively listen. And I'm guessing about this point, you're saying, well, I already asked good questions. I already listened. Well, again, this is about refining those muscles, if you will, or part of that empathy muscle. It's going beyond what you may do every day. To acknowledge, in this case, for active listening, to acknowledge what you're hearing, listen, asking more questions, all while being very cognizant of both verbals and nonverbals. A lot can be told in the nonverbals as well. Fourth is integrating what you understand, taking it all in of what you've heard and building a story of what you've heard as well, or what we may all have heard together. Fifth is to use solution imagination. This is applying that story in a guided process with tools to begin to put your work into action. We start with dismantling judgment. And I should mention today that we are going to cover the first 2, dismantle judgment, as well as asking good questions. So, dismantle judgment. In order to put on someone else's shoes, we have to take off our own shoes. That's pretty powerful. We heard this quote from the founder of Intuit, and it really fits. So this is a part of putting aside some of your own sort of judgments that might get in the way. These are often judgments that sit below the surface. So we need to make a conscious effort to be aware and dismantle judgment when we see it. Some of those judgments, look who we have on the screen, Rob.
Yes.
Somebody
and she's actually
here.
Passing judgment, and she's actually a great example, and obviously a fictional character from Downton Abbey, but she is an great example of being judgmental. There's a distinction between, like, you use judgment in your life and you make a judgment. And that's okay, that's how you navigate through the world. It's about being judgmental. That's what you need to dismantle as you're building empathy.
And some of those judgments might be a confirmation bias, where we seek to hear and make things fit into what we already know. I'll be the first one to say I'm guilty of this one. I know what I'm trying to get across, so I validate information by making sure people tell me what I want to hear. And Rob is probably nodding as well right now. I make sure to ask the questions that will lead me to get the right answer from them, or I discard information that doesn't fit. You quickly see how judgment pops up unconsciously for me and for us. Another might be projection bias, where we project what we want to hear. Sounds almost like confirmation bias, but here we almost give them the words we want them to say again by leading them with questions to take them to the place where we want them to go. Another is cognitive dissonance. Big words here. You may have stopped on the street or been stopped on the street with a request to sign a petition to save the whales. I'm really not into whales, so my judgment takes over before I even hear what they may have to say. I'm thinking, again, you're still nodding in agreement with these. It's almost hard to admit that we make these judgments, but we do, and it's okay because we're human. But you layer in stereotypes and past experience as 2 other forms of judgment, and we are one big judgment machine. The point here is to be aware of these judgments and how they impact your ability to be open and listen without the judgment chatter. Again, we are all human and we all do it. Let's see how these judgments play out. See this woman on the left here. As a model, and by applying what I'll, if you saw my hands right now, air quotes of model standards, would we have seen this gorgeous woman as flawed? These media standards influence our response, resulting in an unconscious judgment. This happens in an instant without thinking about it. So is she flawed or flawless? Left up to wherever our judgments take us will give us the answer. We all acknowledge that we all judge. I've said it multiple times here. We're humans. It's in our nature no matter what. Once we're aware that we're doing it, and that's what we're bringing across today, we want to hit pause on those judgments to better understand what's going on. It is simply a pause. You see how judgment can build a wall. Pausing keeps us open and more accepting. That's when we can see below the surface and perhaps more than we first realized. Let's see how this plays out, and we've got a practice exercise for you. Here is the point. When you hear somebody say, "I'll get back to you in a bit," what is a bit? Write down the first number that comes to mind when you hear, "I'll get back to you in a bit." Go ahead and use your chat feature and click all panelists and tell us the number that comes to mind when you hear, "I'll get back to you in a bit." Well, this is fascinating. We have no two answers alike. We've got 30 minutes to 3 hours to days, by the end of the day to 2 hours. So look how many different answers we have for seemingly something so simple. And we're trying to make sure that we all understand in the same way. Clearly, perhaps not. This may be the case of assumption bias. We make assumptions that everyone thinks alike. Nuances are what or how someone thinks increases our ability to feel with that person. That's that empathy. So now what? How does this apply to you? Give this some consideration. How does judgment factor in your day-to-day? You're probably already scanning, thinking about that right now. Be mindful of when you are being judgmental. Then turn it around and open your mind. See if you can click on that pause. One way to practice it even further is take this back to your team. Ask them the same question. Now, be forgiving. Remember, as I said, they're human. Nobody's perfect. The goal is to shift the balance toward dismantling judgment instead of keeping your walls up.
So as Eric mentioned, there's 5 steps towards building and applying empathy. And the second one that we're going to cover today is ask good questions. So as insights practitioners, researchers, qualitative researchers, we often hear people comment, "Oh, it's not that difficult to ask people questions." Well, true, but the key isn't just asking questions. The key, and what is difficult, is to ask good questions. Often our questions are leading. We're trying to affirm our biases and worldview, as Eric was talking about. And each of these steps build on each other. So if you're not able to dismantle your judgment, you're not going to be able to ask good questions. And let's kind of go back to square one and revisit dismantling your judgment. So you're not trying to confirm your worldview or affirm any biases. I always think of, when I think of this idea of leading, I think of a lawyer in a courtroom drama who jumped up and shouted, "Objection," leading the witness. That's an example of leading. It's giving not so subtle clues to the respondent what you want them to say. And since the desire to please is inherent in most of us, we're eager to please typically, we will then eagerly say what we think people want to hear. Instead of a leading question, you want to be asking what's known as an essential question. One that's broad, like, what does it mean to be successful on the job? There are many different answers to that. You're not leading anybody to this except just talk about what it means to be successful on the job, and there's no particular right answer. It's the answer that's appropriate for that person. that is going to end up giving you a quality answer. So essential questions, they're broad, they're very open, they're not leading, those are quality answers. If you've got leading questions, those lead towards unreliable answers because somebody's just going to be parroting back what you've said or going in the direction that you've taken them. Additionally, then there's closed questions, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but closed questions, I do want to point out, they have their place. So a closed question could be a yes or no or a maybe sort of answer. They have their place, but in that initial exploratory conversation, they're not, it's not going to get you the quality that you're looking for. So you want to have an open essential question. So we have another exercise for you. Which version of this question is leading? Question version 1, do you like an office with a door more than an open floor plan? Or question 2, what kind of office space do you prefer? So just again, use your chat feature, let us know. You can just put in a 1 or a 2. Question 1, do you like an office with a door plan more than an open floor plan? Or question 2, what kind of office space do you prefer?
Looks like we have quite a few number 1s there, Rob, with a couple of 2s as well.
Okay, yes. So question number 1 is a more leading question. It's also a closed question. Do you like an office with a door more than an open floor plan? There aren't a lot of answers that somebody can give. But it's also leading because you've said, do you like an office with a door more than an open floor plan? You're giving them a choice and you're indicating which choice you might want. Versus what kind of office space do you prefer is much more open. So a few more tips for asking good questions. Again, you keep the questions open instead of closed to get more information, as we were just talking about. You don't really know what somebody's going to say, but if you close off the question, you in turn then close off the answer. You want to enter a conversation with, again, your judgment dismantled, so it's building from the first step into the second. And asking a good open question. By doing that, you may be surprised at how the dialogue changes and goes into a new place, and one that's led by the person that you're chatting with. Another tip for asking good questions is to remove the word why from your vocabulary. That is, of course, what you want.
Why do you say that, Rob?
Because, Eric, just as you inflected in your tone of voice, people get defensive. It puts somebody on the defensive. And that goes all the way back to your childhood when a parent or a caretaker may have asked, why'd you draw on the wall in crayon? Why'd you cut your sister's hair? Why'd you throw that toy up on the roof? Why? That, by hearing that, it puts you on the defensive. And as a kid, your answer might have just been a shrug of the shoulders and go, I don't know. But it was putting you on the defensive and challenging you. And so that makes you feel uncomfortable, and it actually has the effect of shutting you down. Now, in the workplace and as an adult, we still get challenged with why. Why was the report late? Why did you leave work early? Why did you skip the meeting? And again, puts you on the defensive. I don't know is probably not a response that you're going to offer up if you're the person receiving that question, but you still feel defensive. And that's not leading to a positive, empathetic conversation. So when you use other questioning words, eradicate why and instead use who, what, where, when, how, you avoid putting the other person on the defensive, and as a result, you get a more open, honest answer. I was first made aware of this when I went through training to become a moderator 10 years ago at Riva, and it really changed the way I interacted with everybody in my life, not just with respondents in a research setting, but as I walked through, I became very aware of my use of the word why and tried to take it out of my day-to-day speech. I still ask that. I want to understand why, but I use other words. I use the who, what, where, when, and how. So here's another example. So asking good questions, the benefit of that. Again, you're getting a wider range of responses. The conversation opens up to responses you wouldn't have received otherwise. That deeper conversation, it improves your understanding, And if you're not asking good questions, you're really having a one-sided conversation, and that does not help build empathy. Here's the practice question that I wanted to ask. And typically you might put a why into this. I'm going to challenge you not to use why, but you've been asked to interview a candidate for a job opening you have in your department, but there's not enough time for a full interview. And you can only ask one question. So which question do you ask? You've been asked to interview, you can use the chat response and let us know your thoughts. You've been asked to interview a candidate for a job opening you have in your department, but there's not enough time for a full interview. You can only ask one question. Which question do you ask?
So Rob, one of the questions we have is, please tell me how you have prepared for this interview. How do you define success? What makes you excited about working with this team?
Okay, hey Eric, I'm just doing an audio check. I heard there were some issues. Can you hear me?
Yes. And Rob, some of the responses that we have, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Okay. Sorry, Eric, I was having some audio difficulty.
Excellent. And it sounds like you're back with us.
I am back. Apologies.
So some of the great responses. What defines a good day for you at work? What makes you excited about working with this team? Based on what you know about the job description, can you describe what a good job looks like in the job? What does success look like to do for this job?
Great questions. Excellent. And nobody used why. Okay, so now what? Let's apply that second step. So again, you've got to dismantle the judgment first, and then come into asking good questions. And so you want to ask yourself, how do you ask questions? What's your actual process? You want to try, I challenge you all, to try to eliminate the word why for just one day. Try to take that out of your vocabulary and see what that's like. And take this back to your team. It's always a great exercise to bring awareness to others in your group. You can take it into your personal circles as well, and just see if people are actually able to do that, and giving them that same why challenge.
And the reason why you want to do that is, got to tell you folks, the struggle is real. Let's help you get back into shape with your empathy muscle. So you've taken a first step here today, and we can help coach and train you to go from maybe not so firm, but to really firm in building and becoming an empathy champion.
So as Eric mentioned when we started at the beginning of the year, we set out to bring our empathy skills out and make those available to others in organizations in order to improve empathy in the workplace, because we do have this empathy crisis. And so we created what we call Empathy Camp. Empathy Camp is a series of training workshops designed to teach people how to build and apply empathy in work situations for critical thinking, problem solving, insight development, innovation, and more. We're very strong believers in the importance of customization, so every session is designed to meet the needs of a team or organization. And we follow a learn, practice, apply training approach that includes direct engagement with customers to develop and apply practical skills. So you're really learning much more detail about the 5, you're getting to practice it, and then ultimately apply it. We sketched out Day Camp, which is one of the training sessions, to give you a sense of what that looks like. And again, built around learn, practice, and apply. Start with why empathy, go into much more detail around those 5 steps. Practice, building greater empathy with the customer or with others in your group. We actually use customers in the workshop, so you can practice safely if you would. with strangers, and then helping you apply it to work and making it real. It's a 7-hour session, day camp as it is, on or off site. We are a small class style. It's 12 to 15 people. We also utilize a pre-survey to evaluate skill level and area of focus that meets the needs of the class and the organization. Because again, it's really important to us to customize it, not just to the people that are in the class, but also to the organization and the needs of the folks that are attending.
So where can we go from here? First, help us improve. Take a quick survey about our time together. It's about us continuing to empathize with what you're facing. Second, find out more by emailing us at hello@ignite-360.com and check us out and follow us on social media. Now it's your turn. Yay! What questions might you have? Go ahead and use the chat feature. Click chat and then all panelists.
And if you had trouble hearing me on anything earlier, please let me know what that was and I can try to fill in the blanks.
I heard all of it, Rob.
Oh, good.
Here's your chance. Operators are standing by. Don't be shy. Give it just a few more seconds here. While we are waiting, the question, Rob, that's been posed, in your experience, when does empathy get confused with sympathy in the workplace?
Oh, constantly. I kind of want to say, there's, you know, if you think about those images that we showed earlier with the photo for sympathy, when Eric was explaining the difference between sympathy and empathy, there was a picture of a person standing behind someone with their hand on somebody's shoulder. Sympathy is often used to, you know, express condolences, obviously, and it feels like a sign of support. However, what it actually does is put a level of, a degree of power between one person and the other. And I think we've often gone into a sympathetic reaction rather than an empathetic reaction. It's actually easier to achieve sympathy. Sympathy is a step before empathy in your emotional development. But sympathy is something that, you know, you see, I talk about how if you're on Facebook and you see the loss of a pet or a loved one, obviously people are expressing sympathy. It's much harder to actually then communicate that in empathetic terms and to say, I really understand, I went through this when my cat died, little Jake, a couple years ago, and I remember how hard it is, and you know, I feel for you. That is an empathetic response rather than, I'm so sorry. And obviously in those sorts of situations, sympathy is often appropriate, but if you take that into an empathy space, you're actually connecting with somebody even further.
All right, Rob, thanks. Another question, how do you get other folks on your team, Rob, to engage in the same level of empathy as you?
That's a good question, and it is challenging. Everybody, just like if you were to take everybody to the gym or give them a fitness challenge or some sort of a challenge physically, everybody's going to be at different places. They're all at different places of being in shape, if you would. And the same is actually true with empathy. So what we try to do is get everybody at a baseline and then start building from there, recognizing some people have more skills than others. But what's really important is that you start and that you bring attention to it, and you start with some of these challenge questions that we presented, just getting people to take why out of their questioning, to get people to dismantle their judgment and approach things from a different perspective. And additionally, I saw there was a question about whether the training was focused on managers or management. And actually the answer is yes, it's kind of all of the above. Depending on the organization and what the needs are, you do organize people maybe based by level or function set. But again, that helps bring everybody along and gather them together. So back to the question about engaging in the same level of empathy as you can only start to bring awareness to it and hope that people grow from there.
Another question we have here, Rob. Culturally, there is a big difference in the empathy baseline. How do you approach a very diverse workforce, especially in the healthcare field?
Good, cool, great question, actually. And yes, in healthcare, it is very difficult. So again, if you've got a diverse workforce, you're looking to establish where the commonalities might be and where to start, and also how empathy is utilized if you're dealing with folks from different cultures, and how do you build from there. But it's providing also a consistent set of training tools as well as reinforcement and ongoing awareness so that people help to understand. Again, empathy isn't something that's, there's an empathy deficit here in the United States, but is not limited to just us here in the United States. It's actually something from around the world. And one of our colleagues was doing a little research on empathy, and it was surprising some of the different cultures that were considered to be most empathetic, and they actually were from very different cultures, but a lot of them actually in the Middle East, which I was surprised. It wasn't exactly what I was going to expect, which is my own bias.
Exactly. Thanks, Rob. Don't see any others at this point, but we encourage you, please, let's keep the conversation going. We've got 2 ways here, certainly on LinkedIn and through Facebook, and also at hello@ignite360.com.
Yes, definitely welcome any emails. Definitely want to continue the conversation. I would love to hear more about how empathy is being practiced in your workplace or not, and what your experiences have been, as well as your challenges. So as you go forth, I want you to please bring awareness to how you are taking in your surroundings and aspire to be like this woman. And thank you so much for joining us today. You'll be getting a copy of this the presentation along with that survey that Eric mentioned, and we appreciate your time and also giving us feedback so we can continually improve.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.